Hello, everyone. This is Erin Aquino Carhart. I'm with the Department of Fish and Wildlife's Watershed Restoration Grants Branch, and this is our 2021 Prop 1 application workshop. We still have people joining us in the meeting, so I wanted to give it another moment or two to allow more people to join us before getting started. I also ask when I'm giving my presentation, if you could please mute yourself so that we don't get any feedback or any echoing. And if you do have a question, please raise your hand or write it into the chat, and we'll get to you. I have my coworker and also our WebGrants lead, Jason. He will be on point to answer or interrupt me if there's clarifying questions during the presentation. And for anything a bit more complicated or anything you want to revisit, there will be a question and answer session at the end of this presentation. Again, I'm Erin Aquino Carhart. I really appreciate everybody taking the time to join us today. So thank you for taking the time to join me today. I am recording this presentation, so this will be made available later on, hopefully today, if not tomorrow, as well as the presentation itself, and we'll have an email sent out on our mailing list. So if you're not a part of that, please sign up through our website. We can provide you a link to that in the chat as well. So I will get started. So this is what we're looking at today for our agenda. We're just going to go over some basics for our grant guidelines and the PSN, or the Proposal Solicitation Notice. Sometimes I use PSN and solicitation interchangeably, but that's what I mean when I say either of them. The basic requirements for this application process, an overview of WebGrants. It is a fairly new system, but for some of you, this is a refresher, and others, it's brand new. So I will provide you a basic introduction to WebGrants. And then what our application and attachments look like, what we expect from them, and then also some tips for submitting a complete proposal, like what that means to us and what we're basically looking for something that's a higher standard, gold standard proposal. We'll give you our tentative schedule, the timeline for this process. And then, as I said, we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So when I talk about the grant guidelines and the Proposal Solicitation Notice, or PSN, these two documents together combined are the requirements for a proposal application. So when you're considering what is required of you as an applicant and as a grantee after you're awarded, these documents are the basis for that. These are also links to these documents, and I've provided links to the documents later on, and they're also available on our website. But just to give you an overview of what these are, our grant guidelines outline our general Prop 1 bond, which is the water bond from 2014. And our program requirements. So it outlines everything from the solicitation notice to how to submit a proposal application, how we evaluate your proposals, and then what is required for you after the award. We have recently updated these guidelines, so please take a look upon your application just to be more familiar. I'm getting an echo. Please, thank you for muting. So in addition to the guidelines, the PSN outlines everything that we're looking for in the solicitation. So it again talks about how to apply the priorities of this solicitation and how we're going to evaluate your proposal. So the difference between the guidelines and the PSN are that the guidelines are the same for all of our solicitations, and they're more general. And for each PSN, we'll have more specific priorities for the project types that we're looking at, for the different Clean Water Act actions that we're looking at. So it's a lot more specific than the guidelines. And whenever the grant guidelines and the PSN are at odds, we recommend that you side with the PSN. And if you have any questions as to like which to follow or any questions on either of these documents, please email us. And again, I will provide the contact information and we can help clarify things for you. So just some basics as on eligibility for this solicitation. To be an eligible applicant, you need to consider whether or not you're one of these entities or applying on behalf of these types of entities. And they are public agencies, which include state, local government, and public universities, nonprofit organizations, and federally recognized and state Indian tribes. So we do not issue grants to any private individuals or private organizations. And if you are a federal organization, you can always partner with a nonprofit or a state agency or local agency to, or any of the other eligible entities to apply. But it's not something where you could be the principal. It would be you're a partner and listed as a subcontractor. The eligible project categories that we're looking for during the solicitation are these: planning, implementation, acquisition, and scientific studies. They don't differ very much from previous years. Scientific studies, I do want to note that these are only specific, this category is only available to the Delta. So if your project is within or significantly affects the Delta, then it could qualify for that category. When we're talking about planning projects, our ideal is looking for a project that will lead to an implementation project. So planning up until you're ready for a shovel-ready project in the next phase. Implementation, this would require CEQA to be completed by May 7th of this year, and that is beyond our solicitation period. So you would need to contact us and show proof that you have completed your CEQA compliance, either that being a notice of exemption or notice of determination. But just to let us know that it has been completed and that your project's good to go. Ideally, implementation projects are quote unquote shovel ready, and which means that they have permits in place. They're at 65% design for engineering or higher. CEQA is complete and they're just ready to grow and break ground. So shovel ready. Acquisition, these are for both land or water interests, and
Erin,
these also, yes?
Can you go back over the federal agency eligibility? We had a question come up in the chat.
Oh, sure. So federal agencies cannot apply as the grantee or the applicant. They could partner with any of these kinds of entities. and be a subcontractor on that project, but they could not actually accept the award specifically. So you can work on a project as a partner, but if you would have to partner with any of these entities that are listed here. So say a nonprofit is approached and the federal agency and the nonprofit work really closely. And technically the nonprofit is the grantee receiving the award, but both organizations use the funds for the same project. The federal agency would be listed as a subcontractor and can use the funds administered by the grantee, which would be the nonprofit. Does that make sense?
I think that answers the federal question. There was another question about whether private universities are eligible to apply as nonprofits.
We have encountered this before, and I think the only way that was available to private universities is if they had a nonprofit organization associated with them. So if they were working under that body, then yes, that is acceptable. Otherwise, I would recommend that they partner with one of these organizations that are eligible.
And we'd like more explanation as to the planning grants, design, CEQA, NEPA permits. What exactly is included?
Included as far as what we would reimburse. We will reimburse all permitting and CEQA and NEPA compliance. Planning can include any of those activities. Your engineering designs. We want to encourage these projects to complete their planning. So we are willing to reimburse all of those expenses. I think it's just a matter of tying those expenses to the overall project and what you're planning for, and just helping us understand what those expenses are and the justification for them. But I think we cover quite a lot. Are we caught up?
We have one more. Can a project be both a planning and implementation project?
No, we don't accept any hybrid projects. You need to choose one or the other.
And there's a question as to how reviewer comments are accessed on prior proposal submittals to understand why the project wasn't funded and how it can be approved.
Yes, so we provide those meetings. You would need to email our general inbox and ask for. I don't recall what we've called them in the past, but just to sit down with some of our staff and go over the reviewer comments. We do offer that. And I think it's just something that you need to ask for and schedule out.
Okay. There's another question as to whether CEQA can be delayed a year so for a project that's going to construction in the summer of 22.
Well, I'm not certain. I think this person, if you could send us an email, we could get to you directly so we could get a bit more information on your project.
Okay. Another question regarding planning projects. Can the funds be used to plan a later phase of an ongoing project? For example, if some of the steps of the implementation have occurred, but more planning is required to finish the implementation off?
I think that should be acceptable. I think what we're trying to avoid is continuous planning. So hopefully, like, you're in a stage where it's a fairly discrete set of planning that you'd need to do, and that once those tasks are complete, you can go back into your implementation phase after the project that we're funding.
Yeah. Can a planning grant apply for a series of related projects, such as a riparian restoration throughout a watershed for flood control?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have criteria for what 65% design means?
Yes, we do. I believe that it is specified in our grant guidelines.
Okay. And do planning projects need to reach a 65% design level at a minimum?
No, they do not, but it is preferred, especially when we're considering you for future funds, if you come back to us and apply it at a later date.
Okay.
I also want to clarify that implementation projects can still do permitting. The minimum requirements for implementation at application is to have CEQA complete by May 7th and to have 65% designs or higher. You don't have to have the rest of your permits done, but it would be in your best interest to show that you've already applied or had some sort of planning in that direction to get them complete. So there is some planning that is allowed in implementation, but it still needs to be majority an implementation project.
Okay, that's it for questions.
All right.
Presentation.
Yes. So acquisitions, they include both fee title and conservation easements, and scientific studies, and they focus on the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta, and hopefully infer management actions and address the Delta Science, or I think Delta Stewardship Council's conservation plan. I'm probably butchered that title, but it's referenced in our PSN.
Okay. One quick question in chat. Can you describe what deed restrictions are required for acquisitions?
I feel like that would depend upon the project, but for the most part, when we're talking about any land tenure, our projects need to have at least 25 years of the 25 years access for the department, and also to ensure that monitoring actions can continue to demonstrate that the restoration benefits still exist, and also to quantify the restoration benefits that aren't immediately apparent after the project. But we have more information in the PSN and some in the grant guidelines. If there are more specific questions, you can answer them, but because the solicitation is open, we are fairly limited to the assistance we can provide you. We can only clarify certain things. And unfortunately for acquisitions, they can be fairly complicated, and my answer must be, it depends.
Yeah. We have another question. If you've got two projects in the same watershed that are both doing the same thing but using different strategies, is it better to submit them together or separately?
Oh, that also depends. I think if the restoration sites are far enough apart, you should consider them two different projects. And I would say, what, 2 miles maybe? I think 2 miles is what we would consider like part of one unit in the past. But if they're in the same watershed, I think you could justify having one proposal for them. There are times that we've recommended later on to split up the project, but I don't think it would hinder your chances of receiving an award or affect your score in any way.
Okay. For an acquisition project, do we require CEQA notice of exemption?
Oh, that's a good question. We'll have to get back to you on that one.
Okay. And if the landowner is state parks or another state agency, what sort of document do we require to show partnership for the project?
So land tenure can be a multitude of different documents. It can be a letter from the organization, the landowner. It can be a formal land use permit or an agreement, just a site access agreement even. But as long as we have something in writing from the landowner that identifies you specifically to be on their properties, which properties and when and for how long. And the how long is preferably 25 years.
Okay. If a project is an implementation project, but also includes some land acquisition, which grant funds won't be going towards, are the land acquisitions required for the application? So if they're using cost share to pay for their land acquisition, and it's
okay. I feel like that. So that's again fairly specific. I feel like if the implementation actions are dependent upon the acquisition, that still, I don't think that would hinder them if things were planned accordingly. Because we've had projects in the past that needed to follow a specific timeline and waited on other pieces to be complete that weren't specifically our grant project, but part of the overall project. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure on that one. Maybe like we can follow up with an email if you want to email our watershed inbox and let us get back to you on that one. I think I'm gonna keep going. If there's some things that like I want to make sure I get through this presentation and then we can come back to the questions.
okay.
Mm-hmm. So when I mention PSN priorities, we have two different grant programs under our Prop 1 grant program. One is watershed restoration grants, and these 6 priorities are what we're focusing in on. And if you are not in the Delta or not affecting the Delta significantly in your project, these are one of the priorities that you need to align yourself with in order to be eligible for grant funding. And just pick the one that best suits your project. If there are others that could apply, that's okay. There are often the descriptions of these in the PSN can be fairly overlapping with each other, but just pick the one that best suits your project. And then the same goes with the Delta Water Quality and Ecosystem Restoration Grant Program. These are fairly straightforward, and I did mess up that name. It is the Delta Science Plan. And so if you are doing a scientific study, please make sure that they align with the Delta Science Plan and the Science Action Agenda. And those items are linked in the PSN as well. So for WebGrants, this is our proposal application system. It also helps us track our grant projects. So this is the system that you must submit your proposal application through. There are no exceptions. Our submission deadline is February 19th at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And hopefully we're all in the same time zone, because if it wasn't apparent in the eligibility slide, you must be an organization within the state of California. even if you are a nationwide organization, as long as you have a branch or a regional office in California, you are eligible. 4 p.m. is the deadline, and I highly, highly urge you to work before this day, because this will take a significant amount of time to gather all your data and enter it into the system, and also provide meaningful, thoughtful answers to what is your project about and what you're doing. If you wait until 4, if you wait until the day of, there have been issues of lag. There have been, I mean, Murphy's Law, anything could happen, and I would like you to have the best chance of submitting on time. Please work on this early, and please submit as soon as possible. And please don't wait till this last day. If something should happen, like really this is the deadline. Please keep to it. So for WebGrants users accounts, again, you cannot apply to the PSN without having an active account with WebGrants. And you can have multiple people working on the same application, but we ask that everyone have their own user ID and login. And this helps not just us like keep track of who's working on what, but you as well. It gives you a timestamp and the last user to have edited one of your documents, and it's just good to keep tabs on like who's doing what. It also helps us, increase security. You're not supposed to share your password with anybody, and so this is just keeping in place with that good ISO type training. If you are a returning applicant, please do not re-register. You already have an existing user ID and password. They are good forever. So please reuse that same ID. If you are now affiliated with a different organization and you want to update that information, please contact us at the WebGrants Help Desk, and I will again provide that email address later on. And we'll help you out with that. If you don't remember your password, there are ways to recover that, as well as recovering your user ID if you can't remember that either. If you find that you're having trouble recovering either, that's also a good opportunity to email us, and we'll be there to help you. And if you are new to WebGrants, please register for a new account. And we will walk you through the process here. So when you go to our WebGrants homepage, there will be a register here link to click on there, and it will take you to this form. So I just a few things to highlight for this. It's fairly standard. It asks for personal information and organization information. And when we talk about personal information, this is your personal business information. So anything that would be your work phone number, email, that's what we are asking for here, not your home information, please. Business contacts only. And when it comes to your organization, please provide the information for the organization that will be the applicant. This is how we assess the eligibility of the applicant, is through the organization they're affiliated with. So if you're working for a nonprofit, but you're a grant writer for a local agency, you need to include put the local agency information here so that it affiliates you with that. You don't need to provide a tax ID. We don't need that at this time, so you can just enter NA for that. And all of the fields with an asterisk are required, so they need something in the field. So for tax ID, please just write NA. And for address, really just the first line is necessary. That's the only required field for this one. You don't have to fill all 3 lines unless you have additional information to put in there. So for registration, again, the organization that you're linked to affects your application and how we determine your eligibility. So please, when you register, affiliate yourself with an organization. If we receive registrations without any organization, we disapprove them and ask you to re-register with an organization. And again, if you're affiliated with more than one organization, just register under one of them and then contact us at the help desk, and we can link your account to additional organizations as necessary. And as I stated before, if you're a third-party user, which you're a consultant or a grant writer for someone, you need to be affiliated with the applicant organization just to show this is who is applying. And when you submit your organization, your registration, it is actually a human responding to each one. So it's not an automatic process. And so we attempt to respond to these within 1 business day. We'll either email you if we need more information, or we'll immediately approve or disapprove your registration. You'll also receive up to 3 different confirmation emails, where it first confirms receipt of the registration, and then another email to let you know if we approved or disapproved your registration. And if it is approved, you'll have a 3rd email that has your temporary password. So going on to the WebGrants application. So you have a user ID and password. You can log into WebGrants and you'll see this screen. This is the home page. It should be the same as what you would see when you log in. So what you would click on is funding opportunities. And then it would take you to what is currently open, which right now we only have 1 solicitation open for the 2021 Prop 1. So you would click on the opportunity title, and that will open the funding opportunity, and you can select start a new application. And from there, it will take you to the general information for your application, and you would then change the information here as necessary. It would automatically place whoever started the application as the primary contact and the authorized official. You don't necessarily have to change these unless you need someone else to be the lead. The primary contact is the only person that can change the general information form. And so this person would be the only one that can add new people to this application, anybody who's collaborating on this. For project title, we just ask that you please keep it brief, something that you use colloquially would be great. Because there are times where we have like a 2-sentence title, and it's really difficult to rattle off when we're discussing it in reviews, or just keeping it short and sweet is the best case. Organization, what will be populated in this dropdown are all the organizations that you're affiliated with. So if there's only one, then that's pretty simple to choose. And if you have multiple ones, it just depends on who's the actual applicant. In this case, let's say it's just the baseline tester. And so that's what I would select and enter my project title and hit save. So after you hit save, it will bring you to this application main menu, and it will list all the different application forms that you need to complete before submitting. And so just to orient you, this is the list of forms here. Each of the titles is a clickable link that will take you to the form. And once you've marked each one as complete, you'll see a check mark appear in this column, the complete column. Last edited will tell you when something was last updated and saved. And so you'll have a good idea as to like which application forms have been worked on and which haven't. So this one that I have a blank for in the last edited column hasn't been worked on. So that's just something to fill in later. Up top, we have some basic instructions. We also provide you links to the solicitation notice, the grant program guidelines, and also our Prop 1 webpage, just so that you can find all of the current guidelines and requirements for this, or if anything has, if you need some sort of help, we have a lot of guidance in those documents. But if you find that you need any help, we have a link to our Prop 1 specific WebGrants help desk as well. So there's also another option to creating an application that we want to describe to you, and it's copying an existing application. So this isn't something we had offered in the past because a lot of our WebGrants applications changed so much year to year. But this time around, we used a lot of the same forms and we made minor changes, really that just updated our dates and also removed Prop 68 language from the forms. But it's largely the same application as last year. So if you are applying to fund the same proposed project as the 2020 Prop 1 and Prop 68 proposal application, then this can be an option for you. It's the same project and they were not awarded last year. What's nice about it is that it saves you some time. You don't have to re-enter a lot of the information that you had in last year. So it gives you a good baseline to work off of. But the cons of it is that it gives you this false sense of security that like you may forget to update your application. Because if things have changed since last year, you should address that. And if there are minor changes to the proposal application forms, those may be blank. Those may be different questions that you haven't answered yet. So it's good to go in, read your entire application and make sure that all of the questions or answers and all of the changes to your project are reflected in those answers. I also need to stress that it is ultimately your responsibility to make sure that the application is complete and everything is correct before you submit. Just make sure that you look at everything and just be very sure that everything is complete and where you want it. So again, this option is only for returning applicants from last year that were not awarded and are applying for the same project. But you would then, when you're at the funding opportunity page, instead of start a new application, you would click copy existing application. and it would take you to a page that showed you all of your past applications. And then you would just select the one that you want to the one that you want to use. In this case, I'm choosing this one, the first listed, and you would click that button that says copy, and then hit save at the top of the page. And then that will open the application main menu and show you all of your listed forms. And so this one will show, it shows you that the date that you started or copied this application will be populated in all of the forms that have data in them. The one that doesn't have data in it is a new form. And so there's nothing in it at all. And so there's nothing to copy. So it's blank here. And so again, please edit anything that has changed since the last PSN, and make sure to edit your general information, because for some reason it does not copy over your project title. And so the project title automatically defaults to the name of the PSN, and that can get really confusing for us because then we won't be able to differentiate your projects. Oh, that's also another thing. When you're naming your project, placing a project title, and you have multiple phases of the same project, or you're applying for, just portions of a larger overall project, and it has a very similar name, you need to differentiate them somehow for us. It's really difficult to tell one from the other if they have basically the same name. So please put some sort of identifier on them, be more specific to maybe the site or the phase number or what's happening in the project when you title it. So going back to your application setup and how to add additional grantee contacts, these are the people that will be collaborating on this application and helping you complete it. So this is, again, this is only done by the primary contact. This person needs to be affiliated with the same organization as all of the other users you want to add. So if everybody is part of City of Sacramento, just an example, then they will be shown in the same organization. And so then you can select them as additional grantee contacts. And just as a reminder, if you're a third party, like a consultant or a project partner, you still need to register or have WebGrants help desk link the organization to your account so that you can still be selected. So this is in the general information form. And once it's already been saved, when you enter into the form, you need to click on Edit to open the fields and edit the information. And it will show you this field, the additional grantee contacts. And so this, again, will only be populated with people under the same organization. So if you don't see the person you need to select in here, please have them contact us, or please have them register. Sometimes that's not done yet, but just make sure that they're under the same organization so you can select them. And you can select multiple people by holding down Control and then clicking each individual name and clicking Save. And then you'll see that additional contact now in your general information after it's saved. And then to go back to the application main menu and the forms, you can click on this link. and go back to the main menu. This is a list of the application form that the forms that are required for the solicitation. And I just wanted to break down basically what each of them are about. So Form 1, eligibility, timing, and priorities, it really just asks whether or not the applicant is eligible and are you satisfying the basic general PSN requirements. And that's what has, those are the questions in that form. Form 2, location information, it's fairly self-explanatory, but this is where you identify where the project's located and also provide land tenure for any of the properties that you're working on. And by that, I mean a land use permit, a lease, the fee title, or a letter from the landowner saying that you're allowed to be on the property. Form 3, for permits, environmental compliance. This just demonstrates that you have applied for the necessary permits or you're planning to apply for them, and that you have started or completed CEQA and NEPA. So this is where you would put that information. Form 4, project summary. So this talks about just the basics of the project. What is it about? What are your goals and objectives? And how are you going to demonstrate them? And this is a more brief version to help us understand just an overall summary of your project. More details will be in your project narrative, which will be an attachment. And we'll get to the attachments later. Form 5, timeline. This will show us how you're planning your project. What is your timeline? What are the work windows? Do they make sense, especially for the species that might be in the area? Have you considered nesting or anything that you need to avoid and minimize impacts to? And are you realistic in your timeline? Are you scheduling enough time for your permit before you're supposed to go to construction? These are the things that we're looking for when you're answering your timeline or entering your timeline and how we evaluate it. So for Form 6, performance measures is really how are you going to demonstrate that you've achieved, like how are you going to demonstrate that you're achieving your objectives? And performance measures is directly tied to the objectives table in project summary. So you would need to submit or enter all of the data into project summary's objective table before you can do Form 6 because they're just linked together. So we have that in the instructions, but I wanted to point that out as well. Form 7 is just what are you asking for? What is your project's budget and how much of it is requested from CDFW? The budget form and rolled up. The details are asked for in an attachment called budget tables, which again we're going to go over in the next slide. Form 8 is the application attachments. This is where you upload all of the required attachments, and this really depends upon what kind of project you're submitting for. And so we detail in both the throughout the application form and in Form 8 which projects must submit what. So you'll look through all of the instructions and see what applies to you and make sure that you address those items. Additional information that you think would benefit us in understanding your project, but aren't necessarily required for your application. I apologize, my connection was getting slow. So for supplemental attachments, this would be where you can submit any letters of recommendation, if you can submit any regional plans that you might be a part of that could help illustrate what the project's about and what's happening with it. That just is a supplement again. Anything that is required will be in Form 8. And Form 10, acknowledgement and signature, is really just verifying that you are authorized by your organization can be subject to a Public Records Act request. So please keep that in mind. Please do not provide any private contact information. Yes, Jason.
Your audio dropped out for a while, so you might want to repeat that entire last bit.
For Form 10 or Form?
Yes.
Okay. I apologize. So Form 10 is the acknowledgement and signature, and this is where you verify that you are allowed to or an authorized representative of your organization, that you're allowed to submit this proposal and receive a grant award. This also has a clause stating that your proposal and its contents may be subject to Public Records Act. So if that is requested, we are asking you, please do not include any personal information, and we provide examples of what that entails. So please, yes, just keep it to all of your business information and anything project specific, and we should be fine. So two required attachments that I wanted to highlight are the project narrative and the budget tables. And these are the two attachments that are required for all projects. So the project narrative is the proposal itself. It should go through the entire project in detail. And when I say entire project, you can include background information and discussion of an overall project or goal that you're going for towards. But we also need to understand exactly what the project will do when it comes to the funds we're awarding. So what will our grant project do? And the template for this project narrative is linked in Form 8, and it's also linked in the Word version of the application. The budget tables are organized in 4 different kinds of tabs. There's also instructions within this Excel workbook, but the applicant budget is where it should reflect what was provided in Form 7 in WebGrants, but it provides some additional details that are rolled up in Form 7. So when you're doing your personnel line items in the WebGrants Form 7, it just shows the name or the role of the person and the amount requested. In applicant budget, this will show their salary, their hours, and the staff benefit. This has a bit more detail to it, and that's what we're looking for. In the subcontractor budgets, you need to provide details for each subcontractor that you're listing in your budget. So if you have 3 different subcontractors, please provide 3 different subcontractor budgets. And we also have instructions for, like, please just copy the templates that we've provided for you inside of there. If you have not hired a subcontractor yet, you haven't gone to bid yet, you can provide us estimates, and that's just fine. For your budget justification, you need to just justify each expense that you have in your budgets, and there needs to be a clear linkage between the cost and the project tasks. And so if you have a particular method that you're using or particular equipment that you're using that is necessary for your project, then please explain what it's for and why you need it. Because really that would justify the expense. If you're worried that one methodology over another may hinder your chances at a good score, it's really just whether or not you've properly justified why you're using this method or this kind of equipment. So really just walk us through it. Pretend like we've never heard about this, like you're explaining it to your mother or grandmother, and we should be good. For cost share, this is for all the different fund sources that you're receiving for this project. And it can be both fund sources that you've applied to and haven't been secured, or secured for the project. We specify that we're only considering cost share that will be spent in the project term for this grant. So please pay attention to that when you're filling out that portion. And again, this template will be available in Form 8, and it is also linked in the Word version of the application. So when, oh yes, Jason.
Your audio cut out again briefly.
Oh, I apologize. Which?
That last sentence or so about submitting the application.
Okay, I haven't spoken too much on this yet. So this will detail on how you submit an application. So first step is just to review your work, and you can click each of your forms individually and read them there, or you can click on application details and you can look at all of your forms on one page. And I think that would be the preferred method if you want to read the entire thing. What's nice about it is it also gives you other options if you want to save your application for later for your own records. So I just have the top of this, but the entire page, you would just keep scrolling and see every single form in one window. So you can review all the content here, and then you can also choose to either save or print your application. And so we suggest that you use the print button at the top of the page and not print to PDF. Print to PDF actually includes all the PDFs you have attached to the application. So if you want to keep your attachments and your application separate, I would recommend that you just click print, and from there you can right click on the document, because it'll open a new window with the application, and so you can right click and choose print or save as, and save it as a PDF or print it as a PDF at that point, and have that for your records. When you're done reviewing, you can go to the application forms again by clicking on this link. So after you've reviewed your application and made sure that everything's current and complete, you need to check that all of your forms are marked as complete, and that's done inside of each form. So as you're going through your application, reviewing everything, when they're done, there is a button to click to mark everything as complete. And if you're certain that everything is complete and all of these boxes are checked or items are checked, you can then click submit. I do want to highlight and stress that you can't change your application after it's submitted. It'll be locked to you. And so if you need to access it again, you need to contact us at Help Desk. But just make sure that everything is good to go before you hit that submit button. It will ask you if you're sure, if you want to submit before you do. So if you accidentally click it, that's not the end of things. So you can always go back or say no or cancel. So I just wanted to demonstrate a few of the navigation features of WebGrants, because it can get a bit confusing at times. So this is the WebGrants main menu, and I'm going to put in my login. And so I'll go to funding opportunities and the Prop 1 proposal solicitation. So it can be confusing at times which buttons to click in certain forms. And oh, I apologize. Oh, that was a good example, actually. Whenever you go into a form and you need to go back, please use the WebGrants back button and not your browser back button. There are times where we've seen a loss in data if things weren't saved properly. So using WebGrants back button is the safest to do. So as just to show you an example of what things look like, you have an edit button at the top of the page as well as save. You'll have a set of instructions specific to each form. And up at the top, you will always have these two buttons, Mark as Complete and Go to Application Forms. Mark as Complete is the last step for each any of your any of your application forms. And this will provide that check mark in the complete column. The thing that I wanted to point out is the difference between the Add button and the Edit button. Edit is for when you have just open fields like these. And Add is for anytime you're filling in a table. So when you're filling in a table and click Add, you'll add a new row to that table. And so it'll open up the form that you need to fill in. And where you can enter in the data that's required. And once all of the required fields, which have this asterisk, are filled out, then you can hit save. And unfortunately, that's a fairly long one, but it will provide you all of the information in a row. And once you have a row, you would click each individual site or number identifier, whatever's in the first column, to open that up and edit it as necessary. So we have this detailed for you in the user guide, but sometimes it's just helpful to see it in person. So if I wanted to edit any of these fields down below, I would need to go back up to the top of the screen, click edit, and then when I scroll down, I see all of those fields are now open. And then to complete editing, you would need to either hit back or save. And save will save your data, back will just undo what you've done and return to the previous screen. When you're in edit mode, when this button has been clicked, you will no longer see any of the add buttons for your tables. So that can often get confusing for people. If you're trying to edit a table and you don't see the button that says add, then you just need to either save your page or hit back to get out of that. And then you'll see the add buttons again. So really that's just the basics of what I wanted to show you here. And again, that is provided in the user guide, which we will provide you links to. And it's also on the homepage of the WebGrants website. So these are our recommendations, just quick and easy. Just please save your progress often. The page does time out after, I believe, an hour. But just to be on the safe side, work offline when you can, or just save your progress often so you don't lose any of that. You can, again, start your application as soon as you can. Please don't wait. There can be any number of issues that happen, especially when people are working from home now and their internet may not be as reliable as their business. Please give yourself a lot of time to work on these and submit. Use the back button to navigate, not your browser. And again, work offline. So we provide you a Word version of the application, and that is linked on our website, in this presentation, and in WebGrants itself. For your attachment file names, please also make those brief, include your application number, and don't include any spaces or commas. We found that commas seem to mess things up when it comes to the Chrome browser. But just to be on the safe side, please don't include them. We also have seen error messages come up when you have too long of an application attachment file name. So please limit it to like 100 characters or less, as long as the application number is in it and a brief description of what it is. That should be sufficient. And again, if you have any questions or issues, please contact us at the help desk. We're here to help you. And most things are, can get confusing when it's a new system to you, but after a while, it gets easier, I promise. This is a list of the different resources for this proposal application. So these are links to our grant guidelines, the PSN, the Word version of the application, and the attachment templates. So this is all a link to a zip folder that has everything together, but we also have individual files if you don't want to download the whole thing. We have this WebGrants user guide, which describes how to register, how to navigate WebGrants, and the basics of how to start and apply and how to submit your application. So everything that I went through, it is also in this handy dandy guide. And last but not least, our CDFW Prop 1 grant website. So if you're looking for any of these items and maybe you missed this presentation, or you're looking for just any updates and information, this is the place to be. We will update our links whenever we update any of these documents or provide you any information. It will be through this website and through our email list. So again, if you want to sign up for that list, you can do so through this web link. All right, so tips for writing complete proposals. I think the most obvious is definitely read the solicitation, the grant guidelines, and the application instructions. You could be surprised when people don't do this, but this outlines everything that we're looking for, everything that you're required to do. So please use those resources. And always, if you have questions, please ask us. We're here to help you. We will be here to clarify things, but we cannot assist you when it comes to planning or writing your proposal. So please clearly address the criteria outlined in the solicitation, that we need to make sure that you give us a clear tie between what's happening in your project and the solicitation priorities. So either the watershed or the delta priorities that I discussed earlier. And those are also outlined in the solicitation. Make any connections to existing plans, which they could be the California Water Action Plan, the State Wildlife Action Plan, or any other documents. Maybe there's an NCCP that you're under, that would be good to know, because it would emphasize any landscape level benefits your project has. Make sure that you also include program requirements in your budget. This is something that people often miss because they don't necessarily read the grant guidelines, or they don't understand that, oh, there's a signage requirement and CDFW will pay for that. So make sure that the things that can get missed, the signage requirement, any WebGrants training and use of WebGrants grant tracking in the future. If you are awarded, our grantees will be required to use WebGrants to submit their invoices in the future. We're just starting that process, but it's something to consider when you're budgeting for your staff's time. Just please connect the dots for us, that you're asked for a lot of information, but we need to make sure that not only is it there, but does it make sense altogether? That you need to make sure that you're justifying your requested CDFW award amount, and that it connects back to what you're proposing to do in your project. If we get confused at parts, and that happens, it doesn't benefit you. So again, tell us this story, assuming that you have a fairly average audience and somebody doesn't know anything about your project, that you just clearly describe your proposed project and hitting all of the key questions. The who's your project team? Who are the landowners? Who are your partners involved? What are you doing? What's the scope of work? What are your expected benefits? When are you doing this? Your schedule, your work windows, the timeline of the overall project. When do you expect to start and end? Where is your project? This also helps us determine, like, if you are awarded, maybe we'll split your project up, because earlier somebody asked, should I combine projects or should I split them? And sometimes the where is what makes our decision for us, because there's no clear connection between the projects. If they're far enough apart, I would argue they should be separate proposals, separate projects. But if they're still within the same watershed, I think you could argue that they could share benefits and benefit each other. So why are you doing this project? What is the purpose and need? What's already been done? And also this connects back to what are the benefits of this project. You can look at definitely the ecological benefits, but maybe even social and economic when we consider disadvantaged communities. And how are you doing this? Let us know what materials you're using, what methodology, what your plans are, or what you're planning to plan. But definitely, like, it helps us connect these dots if you tell us the full story and show us that you've put thought into this, that this is something that we'd be comfortable supporting, and that you know your stuff. This is our tentative schedule for this solicitation process. So we've already released the solicitation on January 11th. And as I stated earlier, the deadline is February 19th at 4 p.m. The CEQA deadline is May 7th. And that is something that will either follow up on with you to see if that's been complete, or leave it to our applicants to submit. I need to confirm that with my management, but we will make that clear as soon as possible. So after the solicitation is closed, we'll evaluate your proposals through April, and we're anticipating our director approving the awards and announcing awards in either May or June. And then we'll get to work writing our grant agreements and executing them through October. Something I do want to caveat with this, the earliest grant projects could start with this fund source is July 1st. However, that does not guarantee a start date of July 1st. You must have an executed agreement after you're awarded to start work, and that can take some time, and it depends upon staff schedules and workload, and also on our grantees, if they're responsive with us in the negotiation process, because it is a back and forth, and we do ask for a lot of information when we're drafting our grant agreements. So the whole process can take time. And so please take that into consideration when you're planning your start date. The grant funds won't be immediately available until you have a grant agreement in hand. So it's signed by both your signatory and my branch chief, and you've received a copy back with both signatures. This all work completed date is specific to the latest end date that any project could have, and we have a different date for CSUs and the UC's grants than everyone else, and that's really just for an administrative window. But these are the latest possible project dates that you can plan for. And again, please contact us if you have questions for WebGrants and application-specific questions. Please contact the WebGrants help desk. This one is the Prop 1 specific one, but we also check the general CDFW WebGrants inbox as well. And for Prop 1 PSN questions, and also just general grant guidelines, or even to ask for a meeting to discuss your past proposals, please submit those questions and inquiries to the Watershed Grants inbox. And so that's the end of my presentation. We can take your questions now. We will gather up the questions and answers and update our FAQs and make sure that's available in our website. I believe one of the newer versions has been updated for FAQs and will be posted either today or tomorrow, along with this presentation recording and slideshow. So if you do have a question, please raise your hand or submit your question through the chat, and we'll call upon you. And I can always go back to any slide and further clarify on things.
Okay. Aaron, do you want to start with the chat?
Sure.
Okay, so unknown user asks, how can we connect with companies that are looking for another company to work with? For example, they have a plan but are looking for water treatment technology. Do we have any general guidance for people who are looking to partner up?
I don't believe we do. I'll have to ask our managers and see what we can do for that. We'll have to get back to you. Yeah, sorry.
Kathleen Hitt asks, are all acquisition projects focused in the Bay Delta watershed below Shasta Dam for this solicitation, or was that a reference specific to the scientific study?
Those are specific to scientific studies. So acquisitions can be anywhere in California.
Elise Ferraris asks, you said that land access tenure is preferably 25 years. Can you explain what exceptions are allowable?
There have been occasions where on federal lands, we have negotiated other terms, but we still hold to the 25-year agreement. So we have had occasions where the negotiation was for a shorter period at a time to be renewed for the full 25-year period. Okay. So that was operating in good faith and also on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. Emilio asks, we have 2 large wildfires that occurred this last year in our proposed project area. I'd like to do field work, such as game cam grid, acoustic recorders in these areas to learn wildlife biodiversity and habitats to guide future fuel reduction projects for wildlife recovery program and prevention. Wildlife recovery, response, and prevention. Does this sound like an eligible project? Would this be a planning option?
I think that could qualify under planning, but I think I would prefer the user to send us an email so that we can directly respond appropriately.
If you are changing the scope of a resubmitted project, such as cutting out some tasks, should you complete a new application or resubmit the existing application?
You can resubmit the existing application. Largely where you talk about your tasks will be in your project narrative, which is an attachment. Just make sure that wherever you have references to your task work, such as your budget justification and your timeline, those are updated accordingly.
Okay. Anna Constantino asks, for Delta Science projects, what is the significance of being a covered action under the Delta plan?
It is something that we were charged with in the statute, and so it's also something to help bolster that plan so that we have momentum for it. and also to help focus our actions in the Delta.
And a follow-up question from Anna, does a project need to be a covered action under the Delta plan to submit as a signage project?
I'm uncertain. I think aligning yourself with the Delta plan would benefit you. I don't know if not aligning yourself with the Delta plan would hinder you significantly, but I think in evaluating two different proposals where one was aligned with the Delta plan and one was not, I believe that the one with the Delta plan would take precedence.
Okay. Tom McCubbins asks, do contractors who are not contributing to the application need to register?
No, they do not.
Okay. And Sharon Sand asks if subcontractors need to link to projects. I'm assuming that's the same question.
Yes, the only people that need WebGrants accounts are those that will directly enter data into the application and collaborate on developing that application online. I mean, you can most certainly collaborate offline and have one person or a smaller group enter all of the data that the larger group develops for them.
Okay.
But yeah, you can limit who are the users.
Okay. M. Tarjan asks, if a federal researcher is working on the project, do they need to say they're affiliated with the eligible org, or can they not work on the application?
You don't have to work on the application if you're not part of that process or part of that collaborative team. Like if you're part of the project once it's underway, that's fine. Really, involvement in WebGrants is specific to those that are entering the application.
Okay. Rossi Daggett asks, what is considered a reasonable timeline to complete CEQA NEPA prep and certification, as well as permit applications?
A reasonable timeline for a planning project?
He doesn't say. I'm assuming it's for a planning project.
Typically, we plan Prop 1 projects for 3 years because of the fund source. So average of 3 years for the project. So if it's solely a planning project, if you can achieve that within the 3-year period, I think you should be fine.
Okay. Justin Suarez asks, on Form 10, does the person completing the form need to be the primary contact for the application?
For Form 10. The person, so yeah, I would suggest that this needs to be the primary contact, because then this person would be the one receiving the letter, the award letter.
Okay. Rossi Daggett asks, can you go over the budget justification tab? How does this connect to the overall budget and subcontractor budgets? Can the cells be linked?
Oh, so let me go pull up that form. Okay, so budget justification. Could you reiterate the question, please?
Sure. Can you go over the budget justification tab? How does this connect to the overall budget and subcontract budgets? And can these cells be linked?
Okay. So these will be linked to the budget by, so in addition to providing any details for specific equipment that you might be using, we're expecting everyone to list whatever is in the applicant budget for operating expenses, and which subcontractors you're using in the budget justification. So if you say construction costs, and then you specify like you're going to purchase a ditch witch, or you're going to have like a backhoe, and you can then link that to the tasks and then the costs involved. So really, like any of the line items that you're listing here need to be connected to this justification. We don't have things automatically linked, mainly because in our experience, things break all the time. And although manual entry isn't the most fun, it's the most secure. So really, like we didn't want to put anybody out by relying on calculations or on automatic populated fields. So we just kept it as simple as possible.
Okay. Susan Strachan asks, the guidelines say anadromous salmonid habitat projects may be required to track a suite of standard performance measures for reporting to NOAA fisheries. Can those measures be provided?
Yes, I believe they can be. We'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay. Andrea Delapa asks, are there specific rules for advancement in case of partnerships with federal agencies participating in the project? They usually require all of the money up front. Any max percentage of total grant money that can be allocated for advancement if available as an option?
Advancement as in advancement on the award versus a reimbursement?
I'm not certain. That's the question as written.
Okay. If the person who asked is still online, if you don't mind unmuting and chatting with us, like I would like to know more about what this question is.
Andrea?
Yes. Yeah, you were right. That's exactly what I was asking.
Oh, okay. Yes, we do not give advances. Our fund source is specifically reimbursement in arrears.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Right. Okay. What is the maximum award ceiling per proposal?
There is no ceiling. We have, I think we have a split between our two Prop 1 grant programs, Watershed and Delta. And I think that would be the only barrier. But really, if you can justify a project that would cover that expense in 3 to 4 years' time, I would be very impressed. And but yes, we don't have an upper limit.
Brett Perry asks, can a project be awarded for a portion of the requested funds, or is it all or nothing? If so, what is a reasonable amount to consider applying for?
So yes, we have on occasion awarded a project for less than the requested amount, and it would just depend upon the tasks in the scope of work. If there was something that was ineligible for us to cover, then it would be something that we'll make you aware of in the award, that we're funding these portions of your project, but not these. It's not all or nothing, and I really couldn't say what's a reasonable amount to apply to, because it depends on the project, and we have such a diverse array of projects that could apply to these grant programs.
Okay.
So reasonable is really anything you can justify.
All right. Susan Strachan asks, in the budget narrative, should subcontractor budgets be broken out by budget category, such as personnel and supplies, or justified at the total subcontract level? So I think she's talking about the budget
tables.
Justification.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So in the applicant budget, this is where your subcontractors are going to be rolled up. And so that you have the total amount for them there. And what these fields are, just briefly, if you have up to 25,000, you can apply indirect costs to those subcontractors. And so really this is just rolled up, but to answer your question, yes, like please put the details of like what staff and what other subcontractors they would be hiring and their expenses, just to give us an idea of what this rolled up amount is. This gives us those details.
Okay. Rossi Daggett asks, does the budget justification repeat every line from the applicant budget and each subcontract?
I mean, you can, for a number of things, you can probably roll some things up. The personnel, I think the things to focus on for these is if it's something that would be a bit like if you had some sort of specialized person, like you have a licensed engineer, and you can explain that we needed to analyze the hydrogeomorphic factors of our project site, and that they're going to be contributing and developing signed stamp designs for us, then that makes sense for personnel. If it's somebody that like is your staff, accountants, and they're going to be handling all the invoicing and budget tracking, I mean, that's fairly self-explanatory. That wouldn't be too much of a lift. I think when it comes to things that we're trying to understand here is like piecing out larger expenses, understanding why certain people of certain levels would be part of your project. If you have an engineer doing your invoices, that's something that we would question because of the disparity of that person's level and the expense for that task. Or if you have, I don't know, a lawyer on here, like what their role would be. It makes sense if you're doing an acquisition or if they're helping you with CEQA, but it's just helping us understand what these people are doing or why you would need certain equipment or subcontractors. That, you know, ABC Construction has all of their own equipment, and so we've bid with them before, and so we're going to go with them because they do good work, or they're specialized and they're one of two contractors that can do this work.
Okay. Another question. You stated that cost share can only be spent during the project term. Does that mean from the project start date to the project completion date, or can we start counting match from when we submit our application?
So the specific requirement states the cost share must be spent between the grant award date and the end of the proposed CDFW funded project term, and must be secured prior to the grant award date. So this would mean if we're anticipating award announcements in June or July, or May or June, then the cost share would have to be secured and spent by that date. So the date of your award letter. So there's still time.
Sharon Sand asks, if you mark a form as complete in WebGrants, can you still go back and change that form?
Yes, you can. It's only when you submit is when you're locked out of updating.
Khadijah Wade asks, should we PDF attachments?
You're not required to, but it can make things easier if you want to download everything as one. But it's not required, and it's definitely something that we specifically don't want for the budget tables. We want this as an Excel file.
Judy Nam asks, what is the total grant amount in this round?
I believe we have 40 million in total, and I think the split is 7 million for Delta and 37 million or 33 for Watershed.
Rossi Daggett wants to know if support staff like office managers, administrative assistants who prepare invoices, they should be listed as members.
No, if they're not actually employed by your organization, they should still be subcontractors.
Okay. But if they are employed by your organization, do we want them listed as team members?
Yes.
Kathleen Hitt asks, ineligible.
Oh, wait, hold on. I'm sorry. I think I misunderstood. Are you talking about the project team or in the budget?
I think he's talking about the project team.
Yes, the subcontractors should be listed as the project team.
But in-house administrative staff, should they be on the project team or no? That's the question.
Oh, in-house administrative staff, if they're directly contributing to the project, then I suppose so. I suppose so. Like I think just I would focus more on who the principal is, like who the project lead is for in-house as far as providing the biographical sketches, and then any key personnel that would be doing like field work or the like. I think administrative, like we don't necessarily need to see credentials for them.
Okay. Kathleen Hitt asks, ineligible costs for acquisition projects appear broadly to include staff time to negotiate conservation easement terms with project partners. Is this accurate?
I would actually have to get back to you on that. I'm not certain.
Okay. Shirley Harris wants to know if we can clarify how we request people to be linked to the application via the web desk.
So you can actually, like, as the primary contact, you can link anybody to your application yourself. But if they're not associated with your organization and they have an existing WebGrants account, then that's when you would just email us at the help desk and ask that we associate them with a particular organization, and we would just need their first and last name. If you have their login information, just the username the user ID would be helpful, and then which organization we're associating them to. And then after the fact, you can add them to your application. While you're editing your application, CDFW we can't access it at all. Like there's nothing that we are able to do for you because it's not, it's not our phase. Like we only can interact with your application once it's submitted.
Okay. Deborah Hurst asks, for an acquisition that is expected to close in December, would you need a notice of exemption by the May 7th deadline, or is a later date possible for consideration?
I think that should probably be a management decision. So if she could email the watershed inbox here, I will put the email up. So the watershed grants email inbox, that would be an appropriate place to provide that question.
Okay. Matt Major asks, you mentioned that planning and implementation must be separate grant applications. What about mapping as part of an implementation-oriented proposal? For example, let's say there's currently rough data available, enough to come up with a budget, but finer scale mapping is needed to inform the
I haven't encountered that in, but I think it would be acceptable as long as that component isn't over. As long as that component isn't, I guess, like overshadowing your implementation, that it's assisting implementation, that could probably be good.
Okay. Erica Iacona asks, when using the disadvantaged communities mapping tool that was linked to the Word document application, there are 2 layers on the map, places and tracts. Tracts covers much larger areas, places is much more specific towns. Which layer applies to this application? She says there's also no explanation in the mapping tool discussing what each layer defines. With places, my project is not within a DAC. With tracts, my project is.
Okay. I actually don't, I don't know. So I would have to ask my management and get back to you on that one. The chat is persistent after the meeting ends, and so we'll follow up with you. If you'd also like to provide us your email address, you can message either me or Jason privately.
Okay. Janet Hatfield asks for a clarification of CDFW's definition of on-the-ground work. Does this definition apply to environmental survey work as is required by NEPA and CEQA? This is also in regards to the CCC consultation as well as performance measures.
I suppose it depends on what kind of survey work you need done, because there are occasions where the Cs don't have the training to do that work.
Okay. Katie Hornbeck asks if there's a template or format for the basis of design requirement.
No, I don't believe we have a template for it. What we're looking for the basis of design is a narrative describing what the plans are doing, and just to walk us through what the designs are showing us, and also explanation of any necessary notes and details that isn't immediately inferred by your plans.
James Hoffler asks, I've seen many definitions of what 65% design means. What are your criteria?
We have definitions for what our program considers 65% design. It is also in line with our department, CDFW, and we discussed that if not in the PSN, it should be in the grant guidelines.
Okay. Susan Strachan asks, some state agencies use rates that include wages, fringe, and overhead in a single rate. Can these rates be used for state agency subcontractors?
Yes.
Okay.
When you're justifying those expenses, just clarify that in budget justification.
Okay. Daniel Nyland asks, are planning project activities limited to the burn area under the fire recovery and prevention priority, or can we also plan forest health fire prevention projects in areas adjacent to burn areas?
I think that would be applicable. I don't think we've narrowed that priority at all to only burn areas.
Okay. Ben Wise asks, do we need to bid for subcontractors, or can we include identified subcontractors already?
If you've already identified subcontractors, they're okay to include, but if you have yet to hire anyone, you must go out to bid.
Okay. Lazara Ramos asks, has two questions about fires. Number one, if your project falls into the new executive order, does that circumvent the regular permitting process?
That would, I believe it qualifies you for a sequence exemption. I'm uncertain what that would mean for any other permits. That would be something that we'd need to discuss separately with management that know more than I do.
Okay. Her follow-up is, the PSN mentions landscapes that recently burned. Should that be spoken to across project types?
I'm not sure if I understand. So landscapes that recently burned across project types. So like the different kinds of project categories, or are we looking at like if it's an acquisition versus planning kind of thing? Like I'm not I don't completely understand.
Okay. Lazara, if you're still with us, could you unmute and talk with us so we can answer your question?
Hi, yeah, I'm here. Thanks for answering my question and for the workshop. I think we're mostly asking about the project types like implementation versus planning.
Okay, well, you can choose either implementation or planning. Like it doesn't, it's not specific to project type when you choose the wildfire category or priority, I mean. So when it comes to, So really, like, what are you looking for? Like, are you trying to determine whether or not it'll be a planning project or an implementation project, or are you just concerned, like, if we're focused in on more implementation over planning? Because we don't have a preference. You can do either.
I think the question's coming from, we have multiple project proposals we think we'll put in, and whether or not we should talk about, proximity to burned areas in each of them. Like if that's a factor that will be weighed in, just like talking about recent fires within different areas and different projects. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
I think it is definitely a consideration when we're talking about restoration actions and any of the like ecological benefits that you'll receive from your project or you expect from your project. So I think definitely like including the fact that this was part of the Tubbs fire or the Camp Fire, it would be good to have that referenced.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hillary Jenkins asks, are there priorities between each of the 6 calls for non-Delta projects, or will you fund across them equally?
We do not have any preferences over the priorities. We look to which are the strongest proposals that have the highest scores and have the most potential.
One of our guests wants to know if this proposition encourages the use of the Conservation Corps.
Yes, we do.
So project proponents should consider reaching out to their CCCs or their urban conservation corps.
Yes, so if you have on-the-ground work, as mentioned in a previous question, you are required to consult with both the Cs and your local Cs. We have some guidance for that in the PSN and in the application. There's a particular form that you're supposed to fill out. Oh, we are hitting our time, actually. So we have quite a number of questions to get to. If you're all willing to bear with us, I can still keep answering questions. We don't have to end the meeting now, but if people need to jump off, I can completely understand. It's up to you.
Okay.
Because we could also try and answer these questions in the FAQs as well.
Okay. Would you like me to keep going?
Sure. How about we'll keep going until 15 after.
Okay.
And then we'll call it then.
All right. Janet Hatfield asks, does NEPA survey work qualify as baseline monitoring, and would CDFW like to see development of monitoring plans in the case of a CEQA NEPA planning project?
I think it can qualify as baseline monitoring, and we definitely would like to see yes, a monitoring plan, regardless of whether or not it's affiliated with a SEPA or an EQA project. I think having a monitoring plan is something that we require and we want to see in our projects. But it's more of a requirement for implementation projects, because we understand that in planning phase, you don't necessarily have everything together yet, and you're still figuring it out.
Okay. Mary Crawford asks, does the protect and restore montane meadow ecosystem objective include montane meadows in the transverse and peninsular ranges in Southern California, or just the Sierras and Cascades?
Yes, it will also include those ranges. The Sierras and Cascades are called out, but it is not specific to those only.
Okay. Karen Youngblood asks, if copying an existing application, how easy is it to edit forms? For example, if there are budget changes and task changes with the new proposal, but the general project narrative is the same, should we use the copy existing application or create a new one?
It's fairly simple to edit. It will just populate a lot of the fields for you, and you will go about updating it as you would just submitting new information. So it's really just a matter of opening individual forms by clicking the links and then hitting the edit button or add if you're manipulating a table. But I'd suggest to go ahead and try the copying function if a lot of your information hasn't changed a lot, because really the budget is a new form, and so that will be completely blank and you would start from scratch there. But for just a few other task changes, I don't think that would be a big lift for you.
Okay. David Wright asks, we're submitting for Garcia and 10 Mile Rivers. Which round of Prop 1 proposals should we apply to? Both?
I wouldn't. Yeah, I go ahead and apply to both. I think it's probably better to cast the wide net, especially when you're considering grant funding.
Okay. Tom McCubbins asks, what are the tenure requirements for installation of fish passage improvement infrastructure at a diversion dam?
Well, I would hope that whatever improvement infrastructure that you create lasts for 25 years or more. But I think it would be similar to what I've already mentioned in the past, that like there's just a demonstration that you're authorized to be on that property and to build this structure. So whoever is the landowner that you're partnering with to add to this diversion dam, it's all laid out in writing.
Okay. Allie asks, if you have not experienced a wildfire, can you still propose a large wildfire prevention grant?
I think the focus of our wildfire priority is to remediate the effects of a wildfire on a landscape level. I don't believe that we're doing fire prevention at this time, but the work that you're doing may qualify under a different priority.
Okay. Anna Constantino asks, there's a question in the application about whether the project is considered a covered action under the Delta Plan. It's just a yes, no in the application. She wants to know if that filters out applications one way or
another. No, it doesn't. If you answer yes, it asks you to specify which actions that your project will be under.
All right. Emilio asks, are projects in Upper Northern California geographic region eligible?
Yes, everything within the state of California and even in the California-Mexico border area are eligible.
Okay. One of our guests asks, is CDFW planning on having a similar funding amounts go to each of the 6 program priority categories? I think we already answered it. We're not. Right.
We don't have any preference, and we don't have any quotas for any of the priorities.
Okay. Tito Marchant asks, can an organization submit 2 different projects under 2 different listed priorities?
Yes, you may. Each proposal is considered a different project. And we would only have that connection between those projects if you identify it in your project narrative.
James Hoffler asks, will everyone on this call be sent the answers that we're providing in this Q&A session?
Yes, so we will post answers with our FAQs, and that we'll also post the recording of this meeting and make that available on our website, and also email our emailing list of, members to let them know it's available.
Okay. Marisa asks, does a planning project that will require access to private property need signed landowner access agreements?
Again, that just depends on the landowner. If they're comfortable with providing you a letter allowing you on their property, then that's the level of documentation we would need. But it just needs to specify the property, who the parties are involved, and the time period and the activities that will be included.
Okay. She also wants to know if letters of support are required as part of the application.
They are not.
Okay.
They are an optional attachment.
Katie Hornbeck asks if we can explain.
Sharda. No worries. I know how that goes, and I just thought I'd try to catch you if that was possible.
Okay. I'm sorry, where did we leave off?
At Katie Hornbeck.
Okay. She wanted us to explain the basis of design requirement and asks if there is a template or a format.
I believe we hit that.
Okay.
So it is, yeah.
Okay. Leanne Ware would like us to highlight updates to the grant guidelines.
Lauren, are you online?
Erin, this is Basil. We didn't highlight the changes, but there are minor changes. We made it accessible. There are a few updates there to clarify some information.
Okay, thank you. So I guess nothing too substantive. It's a lot of the same information, just making it more accessible for our new ADA compliance guidelines.
Okay. During a previous web conference, CDFW staff said that there was 24 million for watershed restoration projects outside the Delta. The 40 million total includes funds for the solicitation coming later this summer that will focus on the North Coast only. Can you clarify?
Did I misspeak for that? Because I believe this solicitation had an increased.
I can't take that.
Oh, thank you.
This is Basil again. Yes, normally our standard PSN comes up with $24 million for the watershed. This year is unique because we are doing another, rolling out another solicitation focusing on the North Coast Salmon Project working areas. So we set aside $15 million for that particular solicitation that will be coming up in the summer. Then the $9 million that was left, we have to add it to the 24 million. That's why we have $33 million. And Erin, you're right in mentioning that it's $33 million for the watershed and $7 million for the Delta.
Okay. Susan Strachan asks, BioSketch identified in the Word application document only addresses publication. Can similar project development experience be used instead of publication record?
Yes.
Okay. Emilio asks, what is the % cost share requirement? Does this have to be non-state and or non-federal funding match?
There isn't we don't have any requirement for cost share. It is something that we will consider, and so it's something that would help us prioritize one project over the other. I believe to get the full 5 points for this criterion is Jason, I don't recall the percentage. Is it 40?
I don't remember the exact breakdown myself.
Yeah. But you will still receive points if you have cost share. I think if you have like a higher amount, like 40 or higher, you'll get all 5 points. But it doesn't knock you out if you don't have that much. And it doesn't have to be non-state or any sort of matching funds. It's really just other fund sources that would for this project.
Okay. Judy Nam asks, if we already applied for another grant and are still awaiting the award decision, can we ask for a Prop 1 grant to make up for whatever shortfall there turns out to be? How would we show this in the budget table?
So if I'm understanding correctly, that seems like you are applying for the same project and whatever the other program doesn't fund, you would take a lesser award if both programs fund you. So I would just ask for the full amount, just in case. And oh my goodness, how would we show this? Because like I think it would be acknowledged that if this other funder pays for majority of the award or the budget, then we could adjust our award accordingly. But I think in the past we've just had people request the full amount and just let us know that we also have other applications out there. I don't think we have a formal way of displaying this. Maybe in the cost share table, you can include that in the description.
Yeah. I think you said, Marisa is asking if an applicant will lose points if they don't have cost share, and they don't lose points, but they're not going to get, they will be more competitive if they have cost share to some extent. Is that correct?
Yes. So really cost share is 5 points in 100-point scale. If you don't have it, it doesn't hurt you significantly, but if we're comparing your project to one that is very similar in score and they have cost share and you don't, that's what would edge you out.
Okay. And do we have a matrix showing how the scoring works that we can share?
I'm uncertain if that's available at this time. Basil, do we have anything?
Sorry, I'm on mute. Yeah, we listed the scoring criteria in the guidelines, but we don't have a for cost share. We don't have a matrix where we break it down. We have the criteria there.
Okay. Matt Major asks if proposals that utilize the Cs are more competitive than those which use a private contract.
No, that's not taken into consideration when it comes to awards, but it is something that we just look for if you're required to consult with the Cs. That is a basic requirement of this proposal process. So if you have on the ground work, you must consult with the Cs and demonstrate that you spoke with them. If they're unable to assist or if they can assist, then you'll have documentation to submit to show that. But it's not taken into consideration for funding decisions.
Rossi Daggett asks, is there a maximum limit for staff benefits?
I don't believe we have one.
Okay, Matt Major asks a follow-up question. How do you determine if you need to go out to bid for a project? If going out to bid is required, does this need to happen before submitting the grant application?
If you will use public funds, state funds for subcontractors, you must go out to bid. And as far as the timing goes for this, I'm uncertain if that requirement's placed upon you before application. I think it is definitely necessary once you are our grantee and have an award.
Okay. We have an unknown user who wants to know if applicants can put in more than one proposal.
Yes, you may. And please make sure that they're titled differently so that we can differentiate them.
Okay. Lisa Underwood asks, should before and after pictures of damage that we would be proposing to improve be included?
That can be helpful. You can provide site photos in Form 2 location information. And if you want to provide any additional information like that, you can provide that in Form 9, which is the supplemental attachments.
Okay. We have a guest saying that there's a link to the performance measures guidance in the application template that leads to a password protected web page, and wants to know if we can provide an updated link for this guidance. We've been coming across this issue periodically. It tends to be a problem with the Chrome browser. If you can't get access to that particular document, we would ask that you would email us at the help desk, and we will send you a PDF copy. Hillary Jenkins asks, how many projects do we typically fund, or will we fund this year? Is it too variable to give a number?
It is too variable to give a number. It depends upon just really the complexity of the projects and how much they're asking for. We have funded in the past between like 30 or 45 projects, but again, it really just depends.
And our final question, Susan Strachan asks, you stated that subcontractors need to be procured by bid. Does this include team members on a planning proposal?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Oh, we've got one last one that came in on a related note. Do you allow sole sourcing of subcontractors that are project partners?
I think my immediate answer would be no. Sole sourcing is typically a red flag, and we would prefer that you go to bid. But if the subcontractors are project partners and you have already this established relationship, that might be a different case and not technically sole sourcing. So I would definitely ask my management on this. Maybe we can follow up with you after the fact.
Okay, that's it for the chat.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your patience and your attention on this. Again, if your questions bubble up later, feel free to email us at either of these email addresses on the screen. And we'll type up our responses, include them in the FAQs, and make all of these materials available for you. Hopefully today, but more likely tomorrow.